Benjamin Carter stepped out of his sleek black sedan, adjusting the lapel of his tailored suit as he gazed at the towering facade of the Sterling Heights Hotel. The sunlight gleamed off the glass windows, casting reflections that seemed to shimmer with the promise of success. For Benjamin, this was more than just another business meeting. It was a pivotal moment in his career. As one of the most accomplished African American entrepreneurs in the country, he had faced his share of obstacles. But today was supposed to be different. The air in the lobby was crisp with the scent of freshly polished marble and expensive cologne. Benjamin walked in with his head held high, his every step exuding confidence. Yet, the moment he crossed the threshold, the subtle shift in the atmosphere was unmistakable. Conversations quieted, eyes followed him, and whispers began to ripple through the opulent room. Benjamin had grown accustomed to these reactions, but it never made him easier to endure. At the front desk, a young woman with a meticulously styled bun and a pristine white blazer glanced up at him. Her smile faltered almost imperceptibly as she processed who was standing in front of her. "Good afternoon," Benjamin said, his tone polite but firm. "I have a reservation under Benjamin Carter. I'm here for a meeting in the executive suite." The receptionist's fingers danced nervously across the keyboard as she typed in his name. Her eyes darted to Benjamin, then back to the screen, before she let out a hesitant, "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't seem to find your reservation. Are you sure you're at the right hotel?" Benjamin felt the familiar surge of frustration but kept his composure. "Yes, I'm certain. I have the confirmation email if you'd like to see it." Before she could respond, a man in a sharply pressed grey suit appeared behind her. His name tag read, Robert Thornton, manager, and his demeanor radiated a mix of authority and thinly veiled prejudice. He looked Benjamin up and down, his gaze stopping just short of outright disdain. "Is there a problem here?" Thornton asked, his voice carrying an air of faux concern. "This gentleman claims to have a reservation," the receptionist explained, her voice barely above a whisper. Thornton turned to Benjamin with an icy smile. "Unfortunately, sir, we have certain standards here. If you don't have a confirmed booking, I'll have to ask you to leave." Benjamin clenched his jaw. "I just told your receptionist I have the email confirmation right here," he said, pulling out his phone. Thornton's expression hardened. "Security," he called out, gesturing to two guards standing nearby. "Please escort this man off the premises." The lobby fell silent as the guards moved toward Benjamin. Gasps and whispers spread among the guests. Benjamin stood his ground, his voice firm but calm. "This is unnecessary. I'm not causing a scene. I'm simply asking you to check again." But the guards didn't hesitate. They grabbed his arms, shoving him toward the door. Benjamin stumbled but quickly regained his footing. The humiliation was palpable. Guests stared openly, some filming with their phones, while others muttered disapproval or chuckled under their breath. Outside, Benjamin straightened his jacket, his heart pounding with a mix of anger and resolve. He turned back to the hotel, its grandeur now tainted by the memory of prejudice. As he stood there, a decision began to take shape in his mind. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Benjamin sat in the backseat of his car, staring at his phone as the events of the past hour replayed in his mind. His hands hovered over the screen, hesitating before finally pressing send. The email wasn't to the Sterling Heights Hotel, nor was it to the colleagues he had missed meeting. It was to his public relations team. "Get ready," the message read. "This is about to go public." Within hours, the humiliation Benjamin had endured began spreading like wildfire across social media. A fellow guest had captured the moment security dragged him out of the lobby. and the video was quickly uploaded with the caption, "Wealthy black man humiliated at Sterling Heights Hotel. Is this 2024 or 1964?" The video racked up hundreds of thousands of views in mere hours. Outrage poured in from every corner of the internet. Influencers, activists, and even celebrities shared the video, calling out the blatant discrimination. "Unacceptable," one high-profile actor tweeted. "Boycott Sterling Heights Hotel," another influencer demanded. By the end of the day, hashtags like #Justice for Benjamin and #Sterling Fails were trending nationwide. The hotel's social media pages were flooded with furious comments, some from patrons vowing never to book there again. News outlets picked up the story, airing the footage on primetime television. But while the internet seethed, Benjamin remained calm, sitting at the desk in his home office. He reviewed reports from his financial advisors. The hotel's parent company, once a fortress of financial stability, had already seen its stock drop by 12% in a single day. "This is just the beginning," Benjamin murmured to himself, a steely determination glinting in his eyes. His assistant, Karen, knocked softly on the door before stepping in. "Sir, the legal team is ready for your call," she said. "Good," Benjamin replied. "Let's make this quick. I have another meeting in an hour." The meeting wasn't with lawyers or PR representatives. It was with his investment team. Benjamin had connections and capital, two things the Sterling Heights management had grossly underestimated. "Let me make this clear," Benjamin told the group during the call. "I don't just want an apology. I don't just want him to pay for the damage they caused. I want the hotel, all of it." His advisors exchanged looks of surprise before nodding in agreement. Within hours, they began contacting shareholders of the Sterling Heights Hotel. With the public backlash at its peak, investors were eager to sell, fearing further financial losses. By the end of the second day, Benjamin had acquired a controlling interest in the hotel. He didn't celebrate. Instead, he sat alone in his office, staring at the paperwork. This wasn't a victory, not yet. The next morning, Benjamin returned to the Sterling Heights Hotel. The same building that had humiliated him now belonged to him. He adjusted his tie as he stepped through the revolving doors, his every move deliberate and confident. The staff froze, their faces a mix of shock and confusion. The receptionist from the day before dropped her pen, her mouth slightly agape. "Good morning," Benjamin said, his voice calm yet commanding. "Is your manager here? I'd like to have a word." Robert Thornton emerged from the back office moments later, his expression faltering when he saw Benjamin. His usual arrogance was nowhere to be found. "Mr. Carter," Thornton stammered, trying to muster a polite smile. "What brings you back here?" Benjamin pulled a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the desk. "These are the documents confirming that I am now the majority owner of the Sterling Heights Hotel." Thornton's face turned pale as he picked up the papers with trembling hands. He scanned the pages quickly, disbelief etched across his features. "This can't be," Thornton muttered under his breath. "Oh, it is," Benjamin said firmly. "Now, Mr. Thornton, I need you to gather all the staff in the conference room. We're going to have a mandatory meeting." Within minutes, the hotel staff assembled, the air thick with tension. Whispers rippled through the room as employees exchanged nervous glances. Benjamin stood at the front, his presence commanding absolute silence. "Good morning," he began, his voice steady. "As some of you may already know, I am now the owner of this establishment. What happened to me here 2 days ago was unacceptable, and it exposed serious flaws in how this hotel is run. That changes today." His gaze swept over the room, pausing briefly on Thornton. who shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Effective immediately. There will be no tolerance for discrimination or prejudice of any kind. We're implementing mandatory training programs for every employee. Cultural sensitivity, equality, respect, you'll learn it all. And if you can't adapt to these changes, there's the door. A few employees nodded hesitantly, while others sat stiffly, their expressions unreadable. Thornton opened his mouth as if to speak, but Benjamin cut him off. "Mr. Thornton," he said sharply, "you are relieved of your duties as manager. Your behavior yesterday was disgraceful, and you're no longer welcome in this hotel. Security will escort you out." Thornton's face flushed with anger and humiliation as he rose to leave. The room remained silent, the weight of Benjamin's authority pressing down on everyone present. "This is just the beginning," Benjamin continued. "We're going to rebuild this hotel. Not just its reputation, but its culture. This will be a place where everyone is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of who they are." As the staff filed out of the room, some visibly shaken, others quietly contemplative, Benjamin felt the faintest flicker of hope. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but it would happen. For now, the storm had broken, but the rebuilding was just beginning. The grand conference room at the Sterling Heights Hotel had seen its share of tense meetings, but none like the one Benjamin Carter had just concluded. The air still crackled with the weight of his announcement. As the staff filed out, some whispered nervously, others walked out stiffly, their faces pale with uncertainty. Benjamin stood near the large windows, overlooking the bustling city skyline, his mind already calculating his next steps. The next morning, the changes began. The newly implemented cultural sensitivity and inclusion training sessions were scheduled for every employee, from receptionists to kitchen staff. Flyers detailing new policies were pinned to every notice board. Respect, dignity, equality, our new standards. But while the surface appeared calm, beneath it, resistance simmered. In the kitchen, where the clamor of pots and pans usually drowned out conversations, whispers of discontent grew louder. Brian Calloway, the former head chef demoted to dishwashing, leaned against the counter, his face twisted in a scowl. "This is ridiculous," Brian muttered, slamming a pan into the sink. "I ran this kitchen for 10 years. Now I'm scrubbing pots like some rookie. You're not the only one." Linda, a former assistant manager now reassigned as a bellhop, replied bitterly, "Can you believe I had to carry luggage yesterday?" Luggage. A few others nearby nodded in agreement, their faces set in defiance. "This Carter guy thinks he can waltz in here and change everything overnight," Brian continued, "but he doesn't know how things work around here. We've got seniority. He can't just toss us aside." "What are we going to do?" Linda asked, lowering her voice. Brian smirked. "We'll let him have his little experiment. But if he thinks we're just going to roll over, he's got another thing coming." Meanwhile, Benjamin was making his rounds through the hotel, observing the changes firsthand. In the guest relations office, he found Aisha Johnson, one of his first new hires, who had taken on the role of head of guest services. Aisha, a young black woman with a calm yet commanding presence, had previously been overlooked for promotions at her old job despite her qualifications. Now, she was tasked with setting a new standard for the hotel. "How's it going?" Benjamin asked, leaning against the doorway. Aisha looked up from her laptop, her expression a mix of determination and exhaustion. "It's a work in progress," she admitted. "Some of the staff are open to change, but others pushing back." Benjamin finished her thought. Aisha nodded. "I caught one of the older supervisors making a snide comment to one of the new hires. And there's a lot of whispering behind closed doors. They're not happy about being held accountable. Benjamin sighed but nodded. I expected this. Change doesn't come easy, especially for those who've gotten comfortable in their ways. But that's exactly why we're doing this. Aisha hesitated, then asked, what about those who refuse to adapt? Are you prepared to let them go? I am, Benjamin replied firmly. This hotel isn't just about luxury anymore. It's about setting a standard. If they can't meet that standard, they're free to find employment elsewhere. As the days turned into weeks, the tension in the hotel grew. The training sessions were met with mixed reactions. Some employees approached them with genuine curiosity, while others sat through them with folded arms and stony faces, waiting for the clock to run out. In one session, Linda raised her hand, her tone sharp and defiant. I get that we're supposed to treat everyone equally, but why are we being punished for something that happened with one guest? Most of us weren't even involved. Aisha, who was leading the session, took a deep breath before responding. This isn't about punishing anyone. It's about creating a culture where incidents like that don't happen in the first place. It's about making sure every guest and employee feels respected. Linda rolled her eyes but said nothing more. Later that day, Benjamin called a meeting with Brian, Linda, and a few others who had been the most vocal in their resistance. He faced them across the table, his expression calm but unyielding. I know some of you aren't happy with the changes, Benjamin began, but let me be clear, this isn't up for debate. If you can't align with the new values of this hotel, you're free to leave. Brian leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. You can't expect people to just change overnight. We've been doing things a certain way for years. And how's that been working out for you? Benjamin shot back. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like that way of thinking is exactly what landed this hotel in hot water. The room fell silent. I'm not here to punish anyone, Benjamin continued, his tone softening. But I am here to make this place better, for the staff, for the guests, for everyone. That's not going to happen if we keep clinging to the past. The employees exchanged uneasy glances but said nothing more. Despite the resistance, glimmers of hope began to shine through. One afternoon, Linda approached Aisha in the lobby. I've been thinking, Linda began hesitantly, about what you said in the training. Maybe I haven't always been as fair as I thought I was. Aisha smiled, acknowledging it is the first step. If you're willing to learn, there's room for growth. Slowly but surely, some staff members began to embrace the changes. But for every step forward, there was still resistance from those clinging to their old ways. Behind closed doors, Brian and a small group of disgruntled employees continued to plot. They whispered about sabotaging the new initiatives, spreading rumors among the staff to sow discord. But Benjamin was not unaware. He had anticipated this from the beginning and was ready to confront it head-on. The tension in the Sterling Heights Hotel was palpable. Weeks had passed since Benjamin Carter's takeover, and while some employees were beginning to adjust to the new policies, a quiet rebellion simmered beneath the surface. The resistance wasn't overt, no outright defiance or dramatic walkouts, but subtle acts of sabotage had begun to disrupt the hotel's operations. It started small. Reservations were mysteriously misplaced, training schedules were altered without notice, and complaints about unreasonable changes filtered in from guests, many of whom had been subtly influenced by disgruntled staff. Benjamin, however, remained vigilant. He had expected this resistance and had prepared for it. In a dimly lit break room one afternoon, Brian Calloway gathered a small group of like-minded employees. This place isn't what it used to be, Brian grumbled. his voice low but charged. "Carter's tearing it apart with all this equality nonsense. We need to show him that we're not going to stand for it." "What do you suggest?" Linda asked, leaning forward, her skepticism mixed with curiosity. Brian smirked. "Let's make him see what happens when you mess with the people who actually keep this place running." The group murmured in agreement. But their plans didn't go unnoticed. A young server named Jacob, who had recently joined the team under Benjamin's new hiring initiative, overheard the conversation. Jacob had dealt with workplace discrimination in the past and had seen firsthand what sabotage and resistance could do to an organization. He decided to act. That evening, Jacob approached Benjamin in his office. "Mr. Carter," Jacob began, nervously clutching his hands, "I need to tell you something." Benjamin gestured for him to sit, his calm demeanor encouraging. Jacob recounted everything he had overheard in the break room. "I don't want to cause trouble, but I thought you should know. Some people are trying to undermine what you're doing here." Benjamin nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Thank you, Jacob. You did the right thing by coming forward." The next morning, Benjamin called an emergency meeting with the entire staff. The grand conference hall was filled with employees, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Benjamin stood at the front of the room, his presence commanding attention. "I know that some of you are unhappy with the changes we've implemented." Benjamin began, his voice firm yet measured. "I've heard the whispers, seen the disruptions, and I know about the attempts to sabotage this hotel's progress. Let me be clear, that ends today." The room fell silent, the weight of Benjamin's words sinking in. This hotel is no longer a place where outdated attitudes and prejudices can thrive. We're building something better, something stronger. If you cannot, or will not, align with this vision, I won't stop you from leaving. But know this, if you choose to stay and continue undermining the work we're doing, there will be consequences. His gaze swept the room, landing briefly on Brian, whose face flushed with anger but remained silent. "To those of you who have embraced these changes," Benjamin continued, his tone softening, "I see your efforts, and I appreciate them. Change is never easy, but it's necessary. Together, we can make the Sterling Heights Hotel a place we're all proud to be a part of." Later that day, Brian's anger boiled over. He stormed into Benjamin's office, his face red with frustration. "You can't just threaten people like that." Brian spat. "We're the ones who've kept this place running for years. You don't understand what it takes to manage a place like this." Benjamin leaned back in his chair, his expression calm but unyielding. "You're right, Brian. I don't know what it was like to run this place before. But I do know what it takes to build something meaningful, something fair." Benjamin leaned forward, his gaze steady. "This isn't about tearing anything down. It's about rebuilding. If you can't see that, maybe this isn't the place for you anymore." Brian's jaw tightened, but he said nothing as he turned and stormed out of the office. Despite the resistance, signs of progress began to emerge. In one of the cultural sensitivity training sessions, Linda, who had been one of the most vocal critics of the changes, hesitantly spoke up. "I've been thinking about what we've been learning," she admitted, her voice quieter than usual. "I always thought I was treating people fairly. But maybe I wasn't seeing the whole picture." Aisha, who was leading the session, nodded encouragingly. "It's not about being perfect. It's about being willing to learn and grow. That's all we can ask of anyone." Linda's words marked a turning point. Slowly, other employees who had initially resisted began to soften. They started participating more actively in the training sessions, asking questions, and reflecting on their own biases. One afternoon, As Benjamin walked through the lobby, he noticed Brian standing near the front desk. To his surprise, Brian was helping a young employee navigate a difficult guest interaction. "Just stay calm," Brian said, his tone surprisingly patient. "Listen to what they're asking for, and then offer a solution that makes sense for both of you." Benjamin watched quietly, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Perhaps even the most resistant could change, given the right opportunity. But not everyone chose to stay. A small group of employees, including a former supervisor who had been demoted, resigned, citing their inability to adapt to the new policies. Benjamin accepted their departures without malice, understanding that not everyone was ready for the journey ahead. The hotel began to transform in earnest. New hires like Jacob and Aisha flourished, bringing fresh ideas and a renewed sense of energy. Guests began noticing the changes, leaving positive reviews about the inclusive and welcoming atmosphere. "The Sterling Heights feels different," one guest wrote. "It's more than just a hotel now, it's a symbol of progress." As the weeks passed, the Sterling Heights Hotel began to thrive under its new leadership. The resistance that once threatened to derail Benjamin's vision had largely dissipated, replaced by a sense of cautious optimism. The road had been rocky, but the seeds of change had taken root. The Sterling Heights Hotel was nearly unrecognizable from the place Benjamin Carter had first walked into weeks ago. What had once been an exclusive bastion of outdated traditions now radiated a sense of inclusivity and progress. The changes weren't just cosmetic, the heart of the hotel had transformed. But for Benjamin, the journey wasn't complete. He had set out to create something better, and the final test was seeing whether those around him would rise to the challenge. One day, as Benjamin reviewed reports in his office, there was a knock at the door. He looked up to see Linda standing there, her expression a mixture of hesitation and resolve. "Mr. Carter, do you have a moment?" she asked. "Of course," Benjamin replied, setting his tablet aside. "Come in." Linda sat down, clasping her hands tightly. "I wanted to thank you," she began, her voice soft. "When you first implemented all these changes, I'll admit, I hated it. I thought you were tearing everything apart. But I see now that I was wrong." Benjamin tilted his head, letting her continue. "I used to look at people like you looked at me that first day," she admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "Not intentionally. But I judged people. I never thought of it as prejudice. But now I realize how harmful my attitude was. This hotel is better now, not just for the guests, but for us, too." Benjamin smiled warmly. "It takes courage to admit when you've been wrong, Linda. I respect that." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "I'm not perfect, but I want to do better." Later that day, Benjamin was walking the lobby when he spotted Brian Calloway at the front desk. To Benjamin's surprise, Brian was calmly assisting a guest with their luggage, his demeanor humble but professional. After the guest left, Benjamin approached him. "Brian," he said, his tone even. Brian turned, his expression neutral. "Mr. Carter, you've surprised me," Benjamin said. "I've been watching, and it seems you've started to embrace the changes here." Brian looked down for a moment before meeting Benjamin's eyes. "I fought you because I didn't want to lose what I thought was mine. But I see now that what I was holding on to wasn't worth fighting for. This place is better now. I can see it in the guests, in the staff, even in myself." Benjamin nodded. "It's never too late to change. And for what it's worth, I'm glad you stayed." The true turning point came during an event Benjamin had planned for weeks, the Grand Sterling Heights reopening gala. Invitations were sent to former guests, community leaders, and press outlets, promising a night of elegance and a showcase of the hotel's new vision. The grand ballroom was resplendent, filled with warm lighting, soft music, and an air of excitement. Guests mingled, enjoying hors d'oeuvre and champagne, while staff moved seamlessly through the crowd. At the center of the room, Benjamin stood on a raised platform. He tapped a glass gently, signaling for attention. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to him. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice carrying a blend of strength and humility. The Sterling Heights Hotel has always been a symbol of luxury and excellence. But for too long, it was also a place where exclusion and prejudice were allowed to thrive. That changed the moment I stepped through these doors, not because I was kicked out, but because I saw an opportunity to make something better. He paused, letting his words sink in. "This isn't just about me. It's about everyone who believed in the vision of what this hotel could be." To the staff who stayed, who chose to grow, and who embraced change, I thank you. To our guests, who trusted us enough to come back, I promise you'll never be treated with anything less than dignity and respect. And to anyone watching, I hope the Sterling Heights serves as a reminder that progress is possible, even in the face of resistance. The room erupted into applause. Benjamin stepped down, mingling with the guests, while the staff exchanged smiles and nods of approval. In the days following the gala, the Sterling Heights became the subject of countless articles, many praising it as a shining example of transformation. Formerly critical voices softened, and guests returned, eager to experience the revitalized hotel. One particularly touching moment came when a young black family checked in. Benjamin watched from a distance as Brian, now one of the most attentive staff members, greeted them with a warm smile. "Welcome to the Sterling Heights," Brian said, handing him their room keys. "If there's anything you need, just let us know." The father of the family nodded appreciatively. "Thank you. It's nice to feel truly welcome." Watching this exchange, Benjamin felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. Months later, during one of the regular team meetings, Benjamin stood in front of the gathered staff. His tone was softer than usual, almost reflective. "I want to leave you with something," he said. "Success isn't just about numbers or accolades. It's about how you treat people, your guests, your colleagues, and yourself. This hotel is proof that when you choose respect and dignity over prejudice, you don't just change a business, you change lives." He paused, his eyes scanning the room. "We've come a long way. But the work isn't done. Change is ongoing. It requires effort, humility, and courage. But as long as we continue striving to be better, this place, this family, will thrive." The room broke into applause. Aisha, now firmly established as the head of guest relations, smiled from the back of the room, her pride evident. Brian nodded quietly, a look of newfound purpose on his face. Linda wiped away a small tear, her journey of growth still unfolding. As Benjamin left the meeting, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The Sterling Heights Hotel wasn't just a success, it was a symbol of what could be achieved when people chose to rise above their past and embrace the promise of a better future. And for Benjamin, that was more than enough.